In the cruel fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, there exists a pair of red shoes that never stop dancing. They possess a malevolent will, forcing the young girl who wears them to spin uncontrollably, dancing through desolate graveyards and piercing briars, until her flesh collapses, until she has no choice but to kneel before the executioner's door, pleading for him to sever her feet with a sharp axe. Do you think this is merely a mad allegory designed to terrify disobedient children? In the very real shadows of the 19th century Victorian era, these red shoes truly existed. This is a true horror story of ultimate elegance and ultimate agony. It was a deadly aesthetic woven from the most vibrant red satin and the most toxic Paris green. The women of that time did not know that the dreamlike green luster they spent fortunes to acquire was actually copper arsenite, a death sentence meticulously packaged as high fashion. As the temperature on the ballroom floor rose, this lethal arsenic would permeate the skin, beginning its macabre dance within the human nervous system. Today, we dive deep into this chemically fueled nightmare forgotten by history, to uncover the green curse hidden beneath the crimson silk. This is not just a tale about the price of vanity. It is about the most elegant, yet most brutal collective madness of the age. Welcome back to The Hidden Cost. Today, we dive deep into the chemical nightmare forgotten by history. Why were the Victorians so obsessed with red and green? To understand this catastrophe, we must travel back to 1814, an era of feverish expansion in science and industry. During this time, a new pigment called Paris green shocked the world. It was more vibrant and pure than any previous mineral pigment, and under the flickering candlelight of the era, produced a haunting, fantastic luster. For the aristocrats eager to showcase their status, it seemed like a gift from God. Red, meanwhile, was the ultimate symbol of power, desire, and social standing. When these two colors were combined on a pair of elegant dancing shoes, they created a visually aggressive aesthetic. However, the secret ingredient behind this beautiful glow was copper arsenite, notoriously known as arsenic. Imagine the shoemakers' workshops hidden in the dark alleys of London. To satisfy the high society's hunger for this lethal green, impoverished workers were exposed all day to floating arsenic dust. They rubbed the dyes with their bare hands, pressing the poison into the soft silk. For them, every finished pair of red shoes meant the loss of fingernails and the rotting of skin. By the time these shoes were delivered to luxurious fitting rooms, they were thoroughly saturated with the powder of death. For the noblewoman who slipped them on, this was not just an accessory. It was a miniature chemical reactor. As the temperature in the ballroom rose from candles and crowds, the dancers' feet would begin to sweat, causing the pores to open completely. At this moment, the arsenic salts dissolved by perspiration would permeate directly into the bloodstream, initiating an irreversible physical collapse. This was not art. It was industrial murder packaged beneath the layers of red and green. In Andersen's dark tale, the most terrifying feature of the red shoes was not their color, but their unstoppable magic. The young girl, Karen, spun and leaped in despair until her feet no longer belonged to her. If you examine this narrative from a medical perspective, you will find that it is not a mere supernatural fantasy, but the most precise literary metaphor for chronic arsenic poisoning. As the arsenic salts inside the shoes permeated the skin via sweat, they began to attack the body's most fragile communication system, the peripheral nerves. In Victorian medical records, this condition was known as arsenical neuropathy. Initially, victims would feel a tingling sensation in their toes, as if thousands of ants were crawling under the skin. Soon, the pain would evolve into violent muscle spasms and tremors. The victim's limbs would begin to twitch and jerk involuntarily. This involuntary movement appeared to onlookers like a mad, unstoppable dance. This is the magic Andersen described. Your will wants to stop, but your damaged nerves force your muscles to keep contracting. Even more brutal was the fact that this toxin was highly corrosive. Dancers who wore these toxic shoes for long periods would see their feet turn black from gangrene, their skin covered in vivid green ulcers, as if the shoes were literally devouring the wearer's flesh. Andersen's Little Mermaid described every step as walking on sharp knives, which is exactly the burning, searing sensation felt by those with peripheral nerve damage. These red shoes did not lead you to a stage of elegance. They turned your nervous system into an out-of-control mechanical device until your bones shattered and your life was consumed within the spin. In that era, beauty and torture were two sides of the same coin. In the most breathtaking turn of Andersen's The Red Shoes, the girl Karen arrives at the executioner's house, pleading for him to sever her feet with a sharp axe, as it is the only way to stop that fatal dance. In Andersen's writing, this is depicted as a form of religious redemption, but in the reality of the 19th century, this was the most visceral despair for countless victims. When lethal arsenic salts thoroughly corroded tissue, leading to severe gangrene and nerve necrosis, amputation was not an allegory, it was the only medical recourse. In an age without antibiotics and with primitive anesthesia, the operating table was often the true end of elegance. The social logic of the Victorian era was utterly absurd. They madnessly pursued porcelain-pale skin and unnaturally slender ankles, yet cared nothing that this beauty was built upon decaying flesh. When a person's feet became so ulcerated from chasing fashion that they were beyond saving, society would discard her as callously as an old pair of worn-out shoes. We might mock Karen's vanity, yet in the 19th century, no one was truly immune to this green ball. Paris green was far more than a pigment for skirts. In the name of elegance, it seeped into every capillary of Victorian life. From the ornate wallpaper of private studies and the exquisite wrappings of confectionery to the very toys held by children, the shadow of arsenic was omnipresent. People conversed in emerald salons and slumbered on arsenic-laced sheets, blissfully unaware they were inhaling toxic fumes bleeding from their very walls. This morbid, collective obsession with unnatural perfection plunged an entire civilization into a state of graceful, chronic suicide. The red shoes in Andersen's tale, Dancing Until Death, were not a mere fantasy. They were the most chilling and ironic mirror of an era where beauty was synonymous with blight, and everyone was waltzing toward the grave without even knowing it. Andersen keenly captured this societal coldness and transformed it into a horror aesthetic of self-sacrifice. Those severed feet, still in their red shoes, dancing alone into the deep forest, symbolize those uncontrollable desires and the toxic residues of industrial civilization that can never be truly eradicated. In the London or Paris of that time, if a once famous dancer suddenly vanished from social circles, it likely wasn't because she found happiness, but because her feet had become sacrifices to that season's trendy color. Those red shoes remained in some dark corner, their surfaces still a striking crimson, their linings still faintly glowing with a ghostly green light, waiting for the next soul willing to pay the price for beauty. This is not myth, it is a fragment of history packaged as a fairy tale. From the mercury nightmares of the Mad Hatter to the arsenic-laden dance of the red shoes, every label of elegance in human history seems to hide a lethal price. We obsessively chase the ultimate spectrum of colors, attempting to mask the pallor of life with artificial brilliance, yet we often forget that nature has already marked death within its most vivid hues. Andersen's fairy tale is not merely an archaic lesson. It is a prophecy of industrial civilization. We create beautiful things, only to be enslaved by them in the end. Today, Paris green has vanished from the fashion runways, but do new toxins exist in our lives in even more subtle forms? Whenever you pursue that unnatural perfection, proceed with caution. If you ever spot a pair of red shoes glowing with a faint, ghostly green light in the corner of an antique shop or within the dusty pages of history, do not try them on. Because some dances, once begun, can never be stopped. Uncovering the truth comes with a cost, but ignoring it costs even more. If you crave more forbidden archives hidden behind history and fairy tales, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Join us as we calculate the world's hidden expenses. This is The Hidden Cost. I'll see you in the next dark corner.